Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you've become invisible? Not because you've changed, but because the world stopped noticing. Welcome to Voice After 50, the podcast where we speak from the heart about what it really means to grow, shift, and come home to ourselves in our 50s and beyond. I'm your host, Beverley, and if you're here, it's because, like me, you've crossed the threshold into this rich, complex, and often misunderstood chapter of life. This isn't about advice from a mountaintop. It's a shared space, a place for real conversations about who we are now, not who we used to be, not who the world expects us to be. Because even now, or maybe especially now, we are still evolving, still questioning, still healing, still stepping into our truth. And one truth that keeps rising to the surface is this: we're not invisible. Today's episode, one I've been holding close for a while, is called We're Not Invisible and We're Out of Patience. Because here's the thing, we've spent years navigating expectations, raising families, building careers, managing everything and everyone. And somewhere along the way, the world started treating us like we'd faded from view. But let me say this clearly, we're not fading, we're focusing. And we're not done. We're just done pretending, pleasing, and pouring from an empty cup. In this episode, we're going to talk about what this season of life really feels like. The clarity, the frustration, the freedom, and yes, the changes no one warned us about. We'll talk about boundaries without apology and the quiet rising strength of women who are no longer asking for permission to exist fully. This isn't a midlife crisis, it's a midlife awakening. So if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or just plain tired of editing yourself, this one's for you. Let's begin here. 50 is not the new anything. It's not the new 30, it's not the new 40, it's 50. It's not something to fix, fear, or reverse. 50 is not a downgrade, it's a milestone. Not the end of youth, but the beginning of clarity. This age isn't about reinvention as much as it is about reconnection to ourselves. For me, turning 50 wasn't about trying to hold on to what I used to be. It was about recognising and acknowledging how far I've come. I've grown into someone who has a better understanding of what matters and who has no time left to waste on things that feel hollow. And I know I'm not alone in that. Women around the world are reaching this stage of life and realising we can set our own boundaries and don't need to explain them. We're allowed to choose solitude over social pressure. We're allowed to walk away from relationships, roles or routines that no longer align. 50 isn't about fading, being quiet and being invisible. It's about focusing, and focusing means you stop giving your energy away to things you tolerated in your 30s and 40s out of guilt or fear. It's about listening more deeply to our intuition and not second-guessing or doubting ourselves. It's about choosing what feels meaningful over what looks impressive. It's about allowing ourselves to take up space emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Turning 50 invited me to stop striving to be palatable, to stop softening my edges for the sake of others, to be more honest with myself about what I need and what I'm no longer willing to carry or tolerate. That's the freedom we start to claim in this stage. Not just in the big choices, but in the daily ones. Choosing solitude over forced socialising. Although it's not always easy, but there's something deeply powerful about realising your time is your own. And it always has been. Saying no without guilt. Saying yes without justification. We don't arrive at 50 with all the answers, but we arrive with better questions and, maybe more importantly, the courage to ask them. There's no roadmap for life after 50. No handbook, no manual handed out, no class to prepare us for this complex layered chapter. Not just for the physical changes, but for the internal shifts, the redefinitions of identity and the emotional weight that often catches us off guard. They didn't tell us that you might wake up one day and feel like a stranger to your own reflection. Not in shame, just unfamiliarity. Friendships you once counted on might quietly dissolve or unexpectedly deepen, depending on who's willing to grow with you. The role you work so hard to fulfill, mother, partner, carer, professional, might no longer fit, or might no longer be needed in the same way. That even as your life looks full, you might feel an ache of emptiness you can't quite explain. You might grieve not just people, but versions of yourself. The you who once dreamed of something different, the you who said yes when you should have said no. That loneliness doesn't always stem from being alone, but from being unseen. Or that you could feel more yourself than ever before and yet still feel untethered, like you're standing on new ground with no map. No one told us how tender this stage can be, how it's possible to feel simultaneously wiser and more uncertain, more grounded and more restless, how we might feel both more ourselves than ever and yet at times feel completely unmoored. But here we are, still showing up, still growing, still asking questions. And little by little we're learning that peace matters more than approval, that real confidence isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quietly walking away from what no longer aligns. It's peace over performance. That self-respect often begins with uncomfortable yet liberating conversations with others, yes, but also with ourselves. That rest isn't laziness, it's recharging, it's survival, it's strength. That we don't need to be everything to everyone, just honest with ourselves. We discover that learning isn't a phase we outgrow, it's a path we walk, with our eyes open and our hearts as willing as we can manage. We're learning how to let go, how to speak up, how to soften without breaking. We're learning how to be present with what is, even when it's messy. It's a deeper becoming, and the wisdom we carry now, it wasn't handed to us, we earned it, every last bit of it. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs don't come from doing more, but from gently setting something down. Not because we're giving up, but because we're tired of carrying what was never ours to hold in the first place. The truth is, we've never been invisible. We've just grown quieter, more discerning, and more proactive, and more protective of our energy. We're not invisible, we're just out of patience. And I don't think that's a weakness. Maybe it's a turning point. So, let's talk about what we're done with and what we're slowly making space for. I'm done pretending I don't know what I want. I'm done apologising for tending to my mental health. I'm done staying in conversations that leave me feeling smaller and drained. I'm done softening myself so others can feel more at ease. I'm done explaining myself to people who were never really listening in the first place. I'm done confusing harshness with discipline. I'm done looking at old versions of myself through a lens of judgment. She was doing her best. She deserves kindness, not critique. And here's what I'm learning to welcome in. More honest, wholehearted connections. More freedom to create, even if it's imperfect and messy. More laughter. And I'm talking about the kind that comes from deep ease, not self-sacrifice. And more tenderness, especially for myself. This is where the quiet shift begins, when we stop abandoning ourselves to keep the peace and start gently choosing what actually brings us back to life. So if it feels right, take a breath. Ask yourself, what are you ready to lay down? What are you done with? And what might you begin to make space for? If you've ever felt overlooked in a meeting, at a family gathering, walking through a store, in a social space, know this: you are not invisible. You may be underestimated, you may be dismissed, you may be ignored by a world that still doesn't know how to value wisdom over youth. But you are not invisible. You are becoming more you, not less. You've lived, you've built, you've healed, you've grieved. And you are still here, showing up, asking questions, searching for meaning, trying again and again. That's not invisibility, that's resilience. Your worth is not defined by what others see. It's defined by the life you've lived, the battles you've fought, the love you've given, and the wisdom you carry. We live in a culture obsessed with youth, and it's exhausting. But the irony is that youth is often spent trying to figure out who we are. By the time we reach 50 and beyond, we kind of know, or certainly have a better idea. We know our voice, we know our values, and we've earned every single grey hair and wrinkle that came along the way. So no, we're not invisible. We're just done shrinking ourselves to fit into spaces that never saw us clearly to begin with. So, as we wrap up this episode, I hope you remember this. Feeling invisible often isn't about actually being unseen. It's about being overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted for so long, the patience starts to fray. We've waited, we've explained, we've compromised. And in doing so, we've gradually disappeared behind other people's comfort, expectations, or needs. So when we say we're not invisible and we're out of patience, we're reclaiming that visibility. We're saying, I've been here all along, you just didn't notice or didn't listen. And now, I'm done waiting quietly for the space I've always deserved. Being out of patience isn't a sign of bitterness. It's a sign of alignment with your time, your values, and your truth. I realise this episode probably felt more like a pep talk, and in many ways it was. While I'm speaking to you, my wonderful listeners, I'm also speaking to myself. Saying these words of encouragement out loud helps me to absorb them too. If today's episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, a sister, or someone who might be feeling alone at this time. And until next time, be gentle with yourself. Make space for your joy, even in small ways. And remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and we're just getting started. Thanks for listening to this episode of Voice After 50. Talk soon.